get all this stuff going here. Speaking of crazy software. Got this part of the video. You've got the live unedited edition of Home Gadget Geeks. It's Thursday nights. It is July 27th, 2017. If you're listening to this any other time than 8 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, it just means you've got the recorded version, and that's okay. Just hang tight. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. We want to do a sound check in the chat room. If you've never joined us for one of the live programs, love to have you come out. We do it every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. We'll get you there. Good community comes out. There's a couple out there. Quasi, good to see you. Drashna, Peter's out there. Ken, hanging out in the chat room. Guys, thanks for coming out tonight. We'll have a few more that join us. Peter says we sound good, so that is a good sign. And so we're here Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Central. Love to have you join us. We do the live show. It's the same exact thing as the recorded show. You can get that available over at theaverageguy.tv. There's RSS feeds, just pretty much any way you can imagine listening to it. We have it available for you. So I can't imagine any other way. Maybe I don't have it in the blockchain, Edward. I don't have it in the blockchain.
Not yet. No.
Ooh, a blockchain-based podcast.
Oh, I like it. Yeah. I've not heard of one yet.
I don't think it's there. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you would do it.
But yeah, we can touch on music a little bit tonight. That was one of my topics.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Well, it'd be fun to. I mean, why couldn't it? Why couldn't you have a blockchain based?
Yep. Yeah. And that gets into some of the people are the whole debate of like what purpose does the blockchain serve compared to like a database and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm getting more and more questions on it, so it's kind of cool. So it's something we'll be talking a lot about the blockchain tonight and some news around it. I think there's been a lot of news over the last couple of weeks, so some good news. All right, I always want to confirm this with you because I always want to say it's Wenninger, right?
Wenninger, yep.
Wenninger. I want to say Weininger because I have some friends there, but Wenninger.
You could say the price is currently about $26.50, I think.
I see $27.16 right now.
Yeah, I know. It bumped up today.
I know. It's just been going all around. Hey, the company, do you call it Alpha BC or what do you call that?
So that's Alpha BTC, and that's the reason that's becoming more important is because I don't know if I really mentally thought through this when I did it, but the whole idea of we didn't want to be Alpha Bitcoin. Actually, the domain Alpha Bitcoin was taken by one of the major exchanges, and so then we did Alpha BTC as an alternative. It's actually worked in our favor because we've done a lot more with blockchain recently, especially, and so the BTC in my mind is blockchain technology company or something like that now. So not necessarily just Bitcoin. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, there's probably more work to do in the blockchain, maybe than there is in Bitcoin.
Bitcoin pays the bills, though. So
yeah, Bitcoin. Well, it's hot right now. We'll talk about that here in just a second. So, guys, welcome, Dennis. Good to see you. Jumping in, we'll get started here in just a minute. Hang tight. Got a good program. Mike Uyghur is out tonight. He had to work, or he's out of town, or something along those lines. So no Mike tonight. He'll be off the next couple weeks, and then we'll have him back here shortly. He has a new studio space down in the basement, which he was pretty excited about last week. So right in front of his drone workbench, which was
cool.
Pretty cool. He's been doing a ton of drone work recently, so good for. He's got a little business upshot Omaha of doing residential and then any commercial stuff he can get his hands on, where they'll pay him to fly that thing around. So it's pretty cool. I'm noticing drone shots now more and more in just about everything. So there was the Western Heritage Museum down there, the old Union Pacific station, that building looks beautiful, but I didn't realize how damaged it was. There are some weathering cracks and some things that are going on, and they did this video to show that they got a $2.7 million grant to fix the outside of that building. And so they posted a video of all the problems with it. and were so it was really cool. But they used a drone to get that done. I lost you there.
Yeah, I'm coming back on.
Okay. I love that you're on the deck. You're not moving, are you? Because I love that shot.
Nope, I'm not.
Okay, good. Let me know when I get your video back. We'll get started. Oh, we got some good music going on the TV behind me. Dennis, glad you could join us tonight. Appreciate that. Good to see you, Tony. Welcome. Good to have you guys out tonight for a Thursday night. While we're waiting for Edward, one of my coworkers is on this program on NBC called The Wall tonight. She recorded it back in the spring, and it's a game show. You can win up to $12 million on this thing. Now nobody wins $12 million, but so that's airing tonight. So there's big airing parties for that, and
somebody from Omaha.
Yeah, my coworker. Well, she's from Council Bluffs, but she's my partner at Gallup, so we do a lot. So she was like, "Oh, are you going to watch tonight?" I said, "No, I'm going to record it. I got a podcast to do. We got to talk about Bitcoin." She's like, "What?" So
how'd she get on? Is it just random?
Yeah, well, it's this big application process, and you go through a series of additions and those kinds of things. So it was a long, about a year long process to get it in and done and recorded, because they recorded them all in one shot in Burbank, back in the late spring, April, May, something like that. So she was gone for a week in LA, and then they can't tell you if they won money or if they didn't, or they can't tell you anything.
Do they get the money before it airs?
I bet they hold it. I bet they hold it because they, I bet they hold it until it airs, and then maybe they get it. So we'll see if she shows up for work tomorrow or not. Tony says he watched it once. Guy listened to his wife and lost $1.2 million. Yikes.
Wow.
Yeah, yikes. All right, let me kick this thing off. You know the routine here, so I'll kick it off, get you introduced, and then I'm going to do a little storage update, and then we'll jump into what's going on. So
we
get some great stuff to talk about. So here we go. This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 320, recorded on July 27th, 2017. Here at Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all your favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the Average Guy.TV studios in beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. The heat has moved away, and as I look at the weather coming up here for the next week or so, we're in the mid-80s all week, low humidity. So we have a lot to look forward to if you're living here in the Omaha area. Edward is as well, and so he's going to enjoy it along with me. Of course, we post the show with world-class show notes, and we'll have some good notes for you this week. Some links you'll want to look into at the website, theaverageguy.tv. You can join us live on our mobile app as well. Easiest way to get those buttons is just go head out to the homegadgetgeeks.com, and there's big buttons for both iPhone and Android. Great way to listen to the show. On the road, stream it. It's great, a little app. You don't have to find us anywhere else, so get it at homegadgetgeeks.com. Don't forget, we're going commercial-free both on YouTube and on Spreaker. And so if you go to either one of those sites, we've shut the ads off. Speaking of shutting the ads off, Amazon shut my ads off today. I do not know what I'm doing wrong with them. But that second account I had created, you guys had used, they closed it down today. So I'm done with Amazon. So we have a Patreon link, theaverageguy.tv. If you want to support the show, you don't need to. But if you want to, head out to theaverageguy.tv, look for the Patreon link. Actually, by getting rid of those Amazon ads, it moved up the jukebox player. And so maybe it makes the site look better anyway. So screw you, Amazon. And they not supporting the show anymore. So we appreciate your use of the Patreon account that's out there. Don't forget, lots of great content. We love to communicate with you. If you have any questions, send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, or track me down on Twitter @jcollison. All right. Edward Weniger is back with us today from Alpha BTC. Edward has been a good friend of the show and always comes on when we have good Bitcoin or blockchain news. Not the same thing, not Bitcoin, not blockchain, not Edward, you have taught me a lot about this. Welcome back to Home Gadget Geeks.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Good to have you out on the deck. You're living. This is living out on the deck. It's a beautiful night. I just mentioned the weather is pretty beautiful. You're super comfortable out on the deck. Weather's great tonight. Hopefully it won't get too dark before we're done.
Yeah, hopefully not. It's beautiful night though. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Mike and I, let me start the show. Mike Uyghur and I have been talking about, I was dig right into the blockchain. So Mike and I have been talking about this service called Storage. It looks like Storj, STORJ. They pronounce it storage. It's really kind of distributed storage where they have blockchain-like storage capabilities where it's distributed around. You have some software that you run on your PCs. They send you these shards of data that you store. And for storing and the bandwidth, they exchange it for this storage coin, so to speak. And so you can earn these coins, and it's kind of worth some money. And it was interesting. We've been talking about it. Mike and I made a video about it. We've had a lot of problems with their software, and so we did a home tech tips. We actually pulled that video down. We just didn't want anybody. We didn't address those problems in the video, and so we just didn't want anybody jumping in there. So if you've been following us along on this, or you thought you were going to try it, we've had some trouble with the software. One, it locked up my on-hub router. It fills up the table space. There's a database in there. It fills up as it's doing its thing, and it just took my router down. We experienced that problem 3 weeks ago on Home Gadget Geeks when my bandwidth just kept chunking, and we traced that back to kind of. So we got a little work to do there, and then the longer Mike ran it, the more unstable the system became, and he thinks maybe as it gets more and more shards, these little bits of data, and they're storing them, that the software gets really, really unstable. And so we've just both pulled it down. We pulled the video down. We're not saying don't do it. It's kind of interesting, and I'm hoping to kind of get back to it. Edward, in a second, I'm going to ask you, there's a competitor to this, so we're going to talk a little bit about it. But if you've been following Mike and I, we just wanted to say, buyer beware.
Do it at your own risk, yeah.
Yeah, it's at your own risk right now. And it's kind of fun if you can isolate it on the system, if you control your own router, some of those kinds of things could be kind of cool. But we've run into the problems. We just wanted to let you know. Edward, you had said there's maybe a competitor to this storage. Did you find it?
Yeah, so there's actually a few, and I don't. The one I'm most familiar with is MadeSafe. They're kind of the most longest standing, and they actually came before Storj, I believe, around the same time maybe. And then the other one there's also one called Swarm and SIA, SIA. But MadeSafe, I'd say, is worth checking out. MaidSafe. So.
MadeSafe, and I did see that SIA, SIA, right?
Yep.
I saw that one as I was searching around. Yep. In the case of like storage, there's a coin associated, right? They have a coin associated kind of with the service, right. And can you mine that just like you mine? Or none of us can do it anymore, but like you mine Bitcoin. Is that how that works?
So we actually own a little bit of that, and the work versus proof of stake is one of the critical underpinnings of how blockchains work and the difference between different coins. But anyway, so I don't know off the top of my head whether they're proof of work or proof of stake, but essentially you could, if they're proof of stake especially, you could just run the program and be a part of that network, yes, and earn some money for it, yes.
Yeah, well, certainly with storage, the goal is to earn their coin by having these shards on your computer and putting those together. I was just it's interesting. I've been watching a few videos. There's a lot of videos out there on how to make mining rigs at this point, and they're all just jammed up with video cards and some really interesting configurations going on. For the average consumer, I kind of get the impression, like, I think we've talked about this in earlier shows. For the average consumer, mining is pretty much over, right? I mean, you really can't.
Yeah, I would focus on. I would find, if you want to make a little money and dabble in this, I would find a good proof of stake coin and just run the node on there, whether it's storage or something. Even if you don't use storage, you install the program and serve their purposes and make a little money and for your computing power. But we actually are in the process of building some Ethereum mining rigs to sell, actually. So the goal is we're going to actually do all the heavy lifting for you and have a turnkey product that if somebody wanted to buy a miner, they could buy it from us. So.
Hey, so you mentioned Ethereum. I was going to hold that till a little bit later, but Ethereum is one of those, I think, and you can correct me if I'm using the terminology wrong. It's kind of a competitor to Bitcoin. It's another coin type. Ethereum's run into some trouble. Most recently, we've seen a wallet get compromised and a large amount of money kind of snuck out. Now, I'll let you tell the story. Can you give us a little bit of the story of Ethereum?
So there's two. So the purpose of Ethereum was just essentially to make coding on the blockchain easier, which Bitcoin, it was not as simple as Ethereum has tried to make it. And then even since then, there's another one that's come out called EOS, which is actually supposed to be even more simplistic than Ethereum. So Ethereum, I think most people probably heard about the DAO hack from a while back. That truly was a failure in the smart contract system, mainly in the means of somebody wrote a bad contract and their money got taken, a lot of money. And so then Parity recently was hacked out. Again, that was a code hack, but not necessarily an Ethereum flaw. But that was just somebody built a wallet that people use for Ethereum, and that wallet was something there was penetrated. And then finally, the other recent one, there was a initial coin offering, an ICO, which you hear and read about a lot. And an ICO, actually, from my understanding, they used a WordPress site to do the ICO. So they were selling all these coins using WordPress, and somebody hacked their WordPress site, changed the address that all the coins were going to. And so the hacker got all of the coins that people thought they were sending to buy these tokens. And so that, again, was not an Ethereum bug. It was just a WordPress hack straight out. So.
Yeah. So what you're telling me is all these problems with Ethereum wasn't the ledger, wasn't the blockchain itself. It was everything that surrounds the service of that blockchain. And in one case, it was a bad wallet. It was a wallet that could be compromised. Exactly. There's an interesting story to that, I think, in that once they figured out the wallets were being compromised, they went in this kind of these white hat hackers went in and cleaned out all the other wallets. I might be making this too simple, but they cleaned out all the other wallets that had this compromise, and so they wouldn't get stolen. Packed them away, right? And then the wallet was fixed and forked, and a new version of it came out. And then they've been, since that, this was maybe spring, since that they've been putting these coins back in accounts, right? Is that an accurate?
Yeah, I don't know what how they were returning them and who they decided to return them to, but that's my understanding of the situation as well. But it brought back a lot of the memories from the DAO, and there was people were actually bringing up the topic of, should we do something with the Ethereum blockchain again to roll back those, whatever, $60 million or whatever that was
lost. A lot, right? I mean, it was a pretty big breach. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and there's still some bitterness in the community about whether they should. That's where ETC and ETH came from. There are now two Ethereum blockchains because of what happened back then, and so it brings up a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about later with forking and which master chains and stuff like that.
So, Edward, just as we talk about this and we say, there's bitterness in the system and there's I think the average guy starts going, who the hell's in control of we've got a bunch of, if these kinds of decisions, mostly, I think people are used to, and this goes way back to the very first time we talked, most people are used to the government controlling the financial system. And over the last couple hundred years, it's been fairly stable, so to speak. We don't have these kinds of things, although that doesn't mean money hasn't been stolen, and we haven't had those kinds of things happen, right? We don't hear about it a lot, but there are thefts and things like that. But does that, in your line of work, you do this for a living, does that concern you when you think about you need for your business, you want people to believe the blockchain is safe and secure and legitimate? Then we have these kinds of things. Does that hurt?
I think the simplistic way of looking at it is I guess it'd be more of like an open source versus closed source debate almost. And if you consider the Fed to be closed source, like all this stuff's happening, like the price is going up, the dollar is going up and down, but they just print more money when they need to, and then the price is stable. And so it's happening. You just don't see it that way. Now it's out in the open, and there's discussion amongst hundreds of people to decide, to make these decisions. But at the end of the day, you could go and fork the Bitcoin code yourself right now, and you could create your own Bitcoin. The question is, how many followers do you have? Who trusts you, and who are you going to invite into that circle to make those decisions and build the code with you? So,
what are the communities like? You've mentioned this, and I referenced in the pre-show. I listened to the most recent edition show of Radio Lab is called The Ceremony. And if you're interested in this at all, you should go out there and listen to that edition of Radio Lab. It's interesting. But you mentioned trust and community. So we think of Ethereum, and maybe it's got a couple different forks. I mean, who are around these communities? How do they get formed? Just who decides? Is it just a matter of building? It's like building a social network. Somebody decides, hey, I'm going to create a fork, or I'm going to create my own coin. I'm going to gather people around me. By the way, this was not unlike this in the late 1800s, early 1900s with banks, where the richest guy in town would start the bank. So, want to be real clear. I mean, we don't think of that today, but is that kind of the way it works?
Yeah, and even I'm watching Turn on Netflix or whatever. It's about the Revolutionary War, and you think about like the South had their own monetary system, and the North had their own monetary system, and then each state had their own monetary system in some cases. So yeah, I mean, it is kind of a part of money, inherently a part of money. But Ethereum is a little different because it's not it's younger. It has a personality behind it, being Vitalik Buterin, who is the guy that actually started it. Versus Bitcoin, which Satoshi's gone now, and so with Vitalik, everybody knows who he surrounds himself with, who his buddies are, the code, and so but then anybody can also go to the GitHub again and make suggestions and submit fixes, and then they may or may not be accepted based on everybody else's, the smart guys running the show, based on their consensus, and if it meets their goals and objectives, which really have not changed a whole lot from the beginning. Everybody's got a white paper, so you can go and actually find out what they're trying to do. And so yeah, with again, going back to what's coming up soon, is that has really gotten into, that's where the personalities have really come out, because you've got, especially, talk about communities, you got like the miners versus the exchanges and stuff like that. And like, who are the most, who's got the biggest Twitter following might have, a bigger influence in the community. That's kind of part of the way things work. But it's not like DC, where all this stuff's happening behind closed doors. It's pretty open.
Yeah, but it's interesting, still politics. You kind of think, hey, it's Bitcoin, or hey, it's the blockchain, and it's just numbers, and and then you go, well, no, you're building a community around this. And I often think, you mentioned this a couple times, I often think, hey, blockchain, it's done, it's not, there's no future development. But you said a couple times, there's developers around this community doing things. What are those developers doing? I mean, the blockchain's set, right? Once you've gotten started, they're not continuing development on that itself, are they? Is it the surrounding software around it, or what's being developed? What's continually being developed?
Well, how the code, meaning how the nodes and the mining works, the calculations behind it, the algorithm, not necessarily the algorithms, but so if you consider, if you think of the blockchain just like the hard drive, I mean, you could always write a different application or change some of the code that accesses that same file system. And so the blockchain, you're right, that is pretty much set in stone, and there's only one blockchain. That is correct. But then as far as how different systems interact with those files, that can be tweaked and adjusted.
Yeah, and that's kind of been its vulnerability to this point, is those things around it, right? I think the last, in a lot of cases, the things we're developing to access the blockchain have been the weak link. Would I be right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've got bad actors, especially, or just bad coders. I mean, that's certainly the case. But I think apropos to what we're to the August 1st discussion, is that there are also improvements in that. I mean, we wouldn't want Satoshi to have just thrown out this code and nobody ever changes it. We want to see improvements. We want to see better ideas come in, things that he hasn't thought about. And so there is going to be inherently, I think, some change no matter what, because hopefully code never just sits stagnant and doesn't get improved upon.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Ethereum that we're talking about, we'll kind of wrap up Ethereum. I want to get onto the Bitcoin side because there's some more interesting stuff there as well. But first of the year or so, we're talking, in the tens of dollars, and not even that, maybe $10 at the beginning of the year, peaking this year probably. I'm trying to get the date up here. By the way, I'm at Coinbase.com. If you're following along, I have actually found that to be a really useful site to kind of keep track of what's going on from a pricing standpoint. They list both Ethereum, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin. Now, we haven't talked about that. We'll hold that for another time. But a nice way to track it, about $378 as of June 12th. Maybe close to its peak. It's running at about 202 now. You'd have to be under a rock to not have heard about what's going on with Bitcoin. In that, we've had you on a couple times. I think the first time it was around 300. I think the next time it was around 600. It's been fluctuating between 1,500 and 2,500 over the last month or so. And I'd asked somebody, why? Like, why all of a sudden has it been doing it? And someone said, well, it's going to split. And I'm like, what? Okay. This is new. So, Edward, can you give us kind of an idea of the politics that's going on? You've alluded to the August 1st date a couple times. So give us a little bit of backstory. What's going on with Bitcoin?
Yeah. And the other site to also look at is coinmarketcap.com, I think it is. And that's got all of the altcoins on there, the little more extensive list than what just Coinbase has. So what's happening is we've mentioned this in previous podcasts. It kind of goes back to the whole block size debate of, you've got MasterCard and Visa that are churning out some, 7,000 transactions a minute or something like that, or a second. And the blockchain can only handle 7 transactions per second or something. There's no comparison really. And so inevitably, for years now, and again, going back to how do decisions get made? It's been talked about for years. People knew that something was coming, that something was going to either have to change, or there were going to be some people that moved on to different blockchains or did something different than Bitcoin. So finally, through the various, there's conferences, there's meetups, there's different debate, places to debate and present your ideas. And finally, a few people presented ideas that enough people agreed upon and thought, yeah, this is a viable option. And so they took those ideas and ran with them, worked on them on testnet, which is which is just basically the dummy environment or demo environment for Bitcoin, and ran through, all sorts of QA and such. And so those parties ultimately decided, and when I say parties, we're talking about, again, some of the biggest miners, some of the biggest exchanges, some of the, some folks that just have made a lot of money in Bitcoin, and so they can afford to throw their weight around and contribute to some of these efforts. Those parties have finally decided on some dates that stuff was going to happen, and so that's what we're looking at now. So everybody had fair warning, heads up, everybody kind of knew it was coming. And so August 1st is what happens is, and this gets really, like you talked about the bankers, or, or even if you talk about like the IMB, like the International, Monetary Fund, sorry, IMF, how do these, who votes? And so finally, was kind of the deadline. And what happens is, when you're voting on the blockchain, everybody from all over the world can vote as long as you have the right software. And so people that were voting, or people are now voting to decide whether the size that happen per second should be increased by increasing the size of a block, essentially. So some people don't like that, though. And so the alternative to not increasing the size of the block, the easiest way to say it is that if you don't increase the size of the block, the transaction fees have to go up, because people are constantly trying to get to the head of the queue to get their transaction passed first. And so now everybody has almost overwhelmingly voted that there should be something in terms of the size of the block should go up. And so, all the drama, while it may or may not have been good for Bitcoin, in terms of raising awareness, maybe the stories weren't the greatest because they were somewhat dramatic, but all that news and hype might turn out to be really nothing much at all, because we might increase the size of the block. Everybody might agree, and we might go on as usual, but it allows more capacity on the network now. So we can transact faster and have more use cases as well.
So a couple months ago, I say, if Mike Uyghur was here, he said on the podcast before, he bought Bitcoin. I haven't. By the way, you told me you'd only come on if I bought Bitcoin during the show. Not ready to do that, but thank you. It's awesome that we have this back and forth, man. I just really appreciate this, you being my friend through all this. But Mike bought some, and I think he bought some at the 20, I think, I'm going to say 23 or 2,400, and it's moved around quite a bit. It dipped this last week. It dipped down to about 1,700, and I gave him a call. You still feel good? And he was like, well, it's come back up. Actually, by the time I got a hold of him, it had come back up. But so I bought coin. I have to make a decision right now, right? By August 1st to keep it or move it, or what are the decisions I have to make if I own Bitcoin?
So technically what is going to happen is different than we'll say the logistics or the operational side of what's going to happen. So technically, nothing is really going to change. Everybody has pretty much agreed that we're going to change the size of the block, and we're going to keep the current blockchain. Now, what could happen is some people have talked about and have actually started already they did take the blockchain and make their own version of it, and they have released Bitcoin Cash is what they're calling it. Now, through this whole process, you may or may not have heard of there's Bitcoin Classic that came out for a while that was talked about. There's Bitcoin Unlimited that came out that was talked for a while, and then there's Bitcoin Core, which is what we have. But it appears that Bitcoin will actually have some legs, and so there is going to be this Bitcoin Cash now, which you could switch over and say, I don't want to use Bitcoin Core anymore because I disagree with the decision that was made by almost the entire community. I'm going to go just roll over and just do Bitcoin Cash. That being said, if you own Bitcoin right now, you get, because the blocks are basically running in parallel, you do actually get Bitcoin Cash. So I don't know what the value of Bitcoin Cash is, but you could hold your Bitcoin Cash, or you could just sell off. And the other day it was like $400. So you actually own, if you own Bitcoin Core right now, which is what pretty much everybody owns, you own your $2,500 Bitcoin Core, and you own your $400 Bitcoin Cash. It's essentially deflating the current, not deflating, because they're running next to each other. So you've added value to what your holdings are. But the question is Bitcoin Cash ever going to do anything? It could drop to a penny of Bitcoin Cash, BCC, and so then you've got nothing. But there are some pretty strong personalities in the discussion that holding fast to Bitcoin Cash, and hopefully, I'm hoping that it takes off and I've got double the money essentially. Who will accept that, or where I can store that, is a different question. I could just hold it in a wallet in my safe, and I could sell it in 100 years or 50 years, and for whatever price it is then. I might not ever do anything with it, but now I have this additional asset.
So let me make sure I heard you right. Okay, yeah. So it's on both. So if I bought one Bitcoin for $2,500, it's pretty well. It's at 2,700 right now. Let's just say, so I bought it for 2,700. You're saying I have both $2,700 worth of Bitcoin and $400. Let's say it's $500 because the price went up. $500 worth of the cash, the Bitcoin Cash. Simultaneously. Has that led this most recent run up? Is that why it's gone in the last couple months? I mean, it's rocketed. Is this leading to some speculation?
No, the run up, or if you're talking about just the past 24 hours, the run up, I think, is because people have finally seen that everybody's agreed. So all these votes are obviously public, and so now everybody's saying, okay, everybody's agreed. We can all breathe a sigh of relief, because for a while there it was a really iffy. Because the hard fork could have been contentious, and then everybody could have been ticked off at each other, and it could have been this whole headbutting. So yes, but if you don't buy before August 1st, you are correct. Now you've got to decide: am I going to buy Bitcoin Cash or am I going to buy Bitcoin Core? So now is the ideal time to log into Coinbase and pick yourself up a Bitcoin. So, because you will own both. Yes.
Wow. And then I would just hold it. I could just hold it
yeah,
and see what happens, right? I mean,
yeah,
it could August 1st, once it's settled, it could settle back down. I mean, there's value here. So it could settle back down into it at 2,700 is Bitcoin valued where it should be. You had a mathematical, when we talked, you were like, this is kind of where it should be. Is it overpriced right now, or is it where it should be?
I think my expectations are going to be too small. I don't think when I'm talking in the public and stuff, I don't want to be one of the guys like John McAfee that's saying it's going to be $500,000 of Bitcoin. And so I just tried to make it somewhat tangible or somewhat palatable to most folks and just say, but so I think my estimations were probably I had said 15 grand at the end of the mining, which was 2140, and so that was kind of based on the existing chart. But as things pick up, I just think it's going to get kind of crazy. So I'll add one caveat to what we've talked about so far, because and it gets into some advanced stuff, a little bit advanced. If you buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, if you don't take it off of Coinbase, if you don't take your private keys into your possession, you really don't have that chance to own both. So if you buy it on Coinbase and you just go through August 1st, not making any changes, you've kind of lost your opportunity to get this Bitcoin Cash. But the other thing I was going to say is the reason they did that, or part of the advantage, and it just is, it makes sense for them from a marketing perspective, if you will, is that they wanted to make sure as many people as could come over to the dark side, could get onto Bitcoin Cash with no loss or no conversion. Obviously, they knew what they were doing, is they were doubling the entire economy, essentially. If they were both 2,700, they've doubled the value of the entire Bitcoin market cap. But so that being said, if you buy on Coinbase for that purpose, you've got to download the Bitcoin wallet to your computer and get your private keys if you want to take advantage of that.
So I would purchase tonight. I make the purchase on Coinbase, then I download that to my wallet locally.
Yep.
Have it available to me, print it out, whatever I need to do to make sure I have it. And I think I opened, when we did storage, I created a wallet there as well.
Yeah, it's probably just a storage wallet
to
hold your storage.
I think I think I created an Ethereum wallet that would allow them to be able to give me a code that I could then redeem those coins for storage. If I did it on Coinbase, I would also create a wallet there. I think I already have, right? I would create a wallet there. Yeah. I think I already have one. So
how much Ether did you make off of the?
Nothing, because I couldn't get it stable enough to actually produce anything. There's some rules around, how much you have to have, and it was taking down my home network, and so it was kind of, now I can't prove that, so I should be careful. I'm not, but it was at the same time I was having router trouble. At the same time I was just starting to run, and since I've removed it, I've had no problems. So you kind of you put two and two together, and it's okay. I mean, it's experimental. We're trying this thing. Those guys, it's storage behind this. They've had their own drama in their letting their CEO I think he has kind of departed, and some other guys have stepped in, and so it's interesting. Feels a little bit like the Wild Wild West in a lot of ways.
The SEC actually going another layer of drama, and something that in terms of with all the bad news that's come out, Ethereum I think has taken a hit from some of the stuff that's been going on, and I think that's just because people have it's heightened people's impression of Ethereum as maybe a more vulnerable or newer technology. But in terms of Bitcoin, with all the bad press, that the price has not really gone down significantly. I think the $1,800 mark that we hit the other day was because of the fear of what was going to happen August 1st. That was kind of before the voting really started, and so people thought, man, this could be bad news. But the SEC actually came out the other day, and specifically around the DAO hack of a year ago or 6 months ago or whatever, they actually said their findings were the DAO should not have ever existed because did not meet regulatory hurdles. They're basically selling stocks, and they shouldn't have been. But we're not going to do anything about it. You guys you already learned your lesson by losing your $75 million. But that being said, the SEC is starting to observe the Wild Wild West and think about maybe guarding it a little closer, I guess. So
yeah, but if we get government regulation in on this, does that not remove some of the open spirit of it? I mean, doesn't it just turn that into a kind of another government shadow industry?
yeah, it's kind of like, could the government ever take down WikiLeaks? I mean, it's, like, even if they choose to do it, I mean, you see, hopefully they'll only take down the bad actors. Hopefully they won't ever come out and take down, like, but you could have legitimate, upstanding coders have their doors kicked in the middle of the night because they issued a token. And, like, I don't think the SEC wants that on their on the news, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned the term bad actors a couple times, and we have to remember in every system there has been this. And there was the junk bond a time in the 80s when it looked legit and people invested tons in it, and a lot of people made a lot, and a lot of people lost a lot in that, and we kind of forget that existed. We've mentioned the banking system in the United States from 1850 to 1950. Well, it's probably too long in 1950, but maybe from 1800 to 1900, in those 100 years, it was pretty crazy here. And even the starting the Federal Reserve System before that, and it's was not smooth sailing in our financial system always. And we have seen unprecedented stability in the United States over the last 70 or 80 or 90 years. And so we kind of think, oh, it's always that way, but it hasn't always been. Right.
Yeah, I mean, even just, the news today or yesterday or whenever, of like Amazon, potentially, being a $1 trillion company. I mean, why does that happen? Why is that even possible? It's because the dollar is not the same as the dollar was, 100 years ago, like that. And so you wonder, like, how did we get here? And so.
You just had to drive it in with Amazon, didn't you? Oh, Amazon! They're making money and they're cutting me out. Oh,
but I watched
Amazon.
the Big Short the other day about the housing market, subprime mortgages and stuff like that, and a lot of the concepts and things that were happening there of people speculating, gambling on, they were just taking guesses basically, and that kind of reminded me of like the ICOs, the initial coin offerings, and like some of them go under, some of them don't, and so.
Yeah. I think if you go in eyes wide open, and we've said this before, I think if you go with eyes wide open and realize that there is some speculation in this, there's no guarantees. It does have value unless everybody decides to cash out. You're right. I mean, that could happen. Yep. It's happened before. Yep. It's happened in plenty of times over the last couple hundred years.
Yep.
As we think about the financial markets. There has been speculation on a variety of things, and gold, and they've had their runs and they've had their crashes, and I mean, shoot, it wasn't that long ago if you bet in oil, you were doing well, and then you weren't.
Yep.
Oil prices have not been very good as of late, which is weird to think, but anyways, so I'm Coinbase today, so Uyghur needs to get that money into his wallet, right? Is he technically selling it when he puts it into his wallet, or
nope.
Okay?
He's going to pay a couple dollars to transfer it from one account to the other account, but he's not selling it. No.
Okay, so it sits in his wallet. We're going to go through the August 1st transition. There's going to be some code deployed. Some things are going to happen. It probably won't be as smooth as everybody's hoping it is, but it will go through. Then what? What do I do next? Well, how long do I wait? How does that work?
There's an article, I will try to send it to you to put in the notes. There's an article that addresses this specifically of what you're going to actually do is, because you own your private keys, you own your, the passwords for your account essentially. What you're going to do is take that private key. From what I understand, you can't do it on the same computer. You have to do two separate computers. You're going to take that private key over here, and you're going to have those Bitcoin over here in this wallet, which is the old Bitcoin wallet, or the biggest Bitcoin wallet. Then you're going to take that same private key, go over to another computer, download the new wallet, and that same private key will work on that wallet as well. And so now you have this much Bitcoin Core over here, this much Bitcoin Cash over here, and then you could go out to an open market and choose to sell your Bitcoin Cash or do whatever you choose to do with the Bitcoin Cash. So,
is there any fear that there's been some speculative run, knowing this was going to happen, that people have bought in to be able to sell on August 1st or whatever, and that with a massive sell, it will drive the market down?
Yeah, I mean, those are all market dynamics that factor into it. I don't know how much so, but certainly yes.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly people know that this is the case, and everybody's going to get these coins if they play it right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be for some, they might want to, because I could hold those keys. I don't have to create that. Is there a time limit?
Yep.
Okay. So I could hold the keys in my wallet,
Yep.
wait for the right time and bring those back over, and they're going to buy. And it's the keys aren't value. They're coin, right? They're not a dollar amount. They're a coin amount. Is that right?
Yeah, so the key says that you own a wallet, and that wallet could have 1 coin in it, or it could have 100 coins in it,
Or a fraction of a coin.
or a fraction. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So it's coin based. So in theory, if you're a smart consumer, you would pull your wallet out at its highest point, wait for people to try and sell to make money, and so in that sense, that will kind of hold the market at bay a little bit, because people are going to try and get the lowest price, but that may hold people back from actually selling because they're waiting for the price to dip, because that would be the value, right?
Your biggest risk in the whole thing is that Bitcoin Cash, they give up at some point, and the whole thing just goes belly up. I mean, that is a risk that Bitcoin, but it didn't cost you anything to get in, so you're not out anything really. And so, but yeah, the if you want to look at a good example, we mentioned the hard fork that Ethereum did, and then they now have ETH, and they now have ETC. That's essentially the same thing that is happening with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. That being said, ETC, when they first split, it was worth $0.25, and I totally missed that opportunity, and now it's worth $16, and so the price has gone up since that hard fork, and so you could say that might be a good model for what's going to happen.
Okay. Something to watch for. Yeah. I don't think super scary. Even in this is where people lose it financially. Even fractions of things are worth stuff. And we have, of course, you and I live in the town that Warren Buffett lives in, and Warren Buffett has this thing, Berkshire Hathaway, and the A shares are hundred. I don't. What is that closing? Are they hundreds of thousands now? I think, right? And people are like, oh, I could never afford a share of that. Well, no, but you could still get a partial share, and it'll still grow like a regular share does. And they kind of miss out on the percentages. That there may be some say in this too, as we think about, Bitcoin does look pretty expensive at 2,700. It's 2,700 right now. It's been hovering for the last few minutes at that price. That may seem like, well, I can't buy 27, but you can purchase a part or parts of a coin, and make it work that way, and the value will grow just as much because it's a percentage basis. So
you could Coinbase, or you can go to the Bitcoin ATM at Jones Brothers and
put some cash in. It helps you out.
But yeah, I mean, I think you've talked about this. If you have a portfolio, I mean, $1,000 out of your portfolio is probably not a significant amount to buy a portion of a Bitcoin and see what happens. Just hold it. So,
yeah. Are there any? So speaking of that, as we think about portfolio and investment portfolios, is there any way to bring Bitcoin in, or are you aware of any funds or any of these companies that do these mutual funds, whatever? Is there any that have embraced Bitcoin where you can buy Bitcoin through the fund?
Yeah. So the I can't remember this. Greylock, I believe it's Greylock Ventures has a ETF, but the problem or the downside of that is there's a minimum. It's I believe it's like 25 grand. It's probably not the best way to get into a small position. But yes, you could buy that ETF on the typical exchanges like the TDs and the Schwabs. And then, but the other problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily always track the price as well as you would like. You risk the upside, missing out on some of the upside, because it is a little more steady.
Fees associated with it. You have somebody else managing your money. I mean, it's not that difficult today. Like, and I would still count Bitcoin as being very speculative. Yeah. And so, this is going to be your highest, or it fit into that very high risk category if you're treating this like an investment, right? And so it would be very, very wise to treat it that way. Yeah. But I think we're to a point where that I've spent money on more speculative stuff. I mean, I put money on level 3 back in the day. And of course, they're gone. CenturyLink has purchased them, and that stock went to zero. So there isn't that much difference. In fact, there may be more cases, if you think of being in the stock market, of things failing or it be going to zero or whatever, than Bitcoin at this point, or the blockchain, let's say, so to speak, these coins that are out there. Have we seen many that have started and then gone away?
Oh yeah. I mean, either on purpose or because they just couldn't hack. I mean, you've got coders that are trying to run a financial institution essentially, and that doesn't play out so well. But yeah, I mean, but on the other side of that, you've got Tezos, which raised $235 million a month ago on by offering a token. So they're very well supported by the venture capital community and by, again, a lot of smart people. It's not necessarily a fly-by-night token. So just pick and choose wisely, and you can ask me if you have questions about one or something like that. So
yeah, is Bitcoin the top at this point? I mean, if you were, are they the most? If someone was going to start, is that where they start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the least susceptible to the bad news, like we talked about Ethereum. For example, the other day, when they took down Alphabay, they took down it was a dark website where people were buying and selling illegal activities. The price of Monero, which we mentioned Monero and Zcash earlier. So Zcash and Monero are pretty similar in what they do. The price of Monero actually went up, and part of the hypothesis was that because all these folks were getting they had to do something or find an alternative to transact on the dark web. And Monero was basically what a bunch of people picked to use to buy and sell things on the dark web. And so there's those type of outside forces that makes the price a lot less stable. CoinMarketCap.com will show you market caps for all the coins, and I would just stay, as long as you stay in the top 5, top 10. I would really stay in the top 5. As long as you stay in the top 5 there, like Litecoin and Ripple and stuff like that, you're pretty safe, I think, though.
Ripple, and I haven't heard of that one, but at Coinbase, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, those are the 3 that are listed.
Yeah.
There. Are those 3 pretty good ones if I were going to stay in the space?
Yep.
Okay.
I would. Those are all fine. I wouldn't. Yeah. For the typical audience member, probably I would not deviate or go outside of that range.
Yeah. I think it's, if you're going to dip in a little bit, dip your toe in the pool. I don't know. I like it more than going to the casino. I like my odds a little bit more than that. And, many of our listeners are probably not casino goers, but maybe they are. And I like this. I mean, I've tried some of these. Like I said, I had level 3. I had Red Hat back in the day. I bought Red Hat at, I don't know, 25 when it first came out, maybe 40. And that went all the way up to 400. And then, of course, it came back. This was the first version of the bubble, of the internet bubble that we had back in 1999, 2000.
If you just, I mean, the amount of, again, they're different things for different purposes. If you look at Bitcoin, why it's so big, it has a lot of value to it. If you look at Ethereum is where you see more of the big names. Mercedes-Benz just did some stuff with Ethereum. Like, you're seeing a lot more involvement by some big companies with Ethereum, and I don't think they'd be in there if they had some confidence in what it was and how long it was going to be around. So.
Yeah. So, okay. Anything when we think of this August 1st date and just kind of the current state of coin, anything else we should cover before I want to ask you about the general condition of the blockchain and how it's being used out there. But anything else from a coin perspective?
I think it's just important to remember that, all this stuff is like, you're like we've talked about a little bit already, like you're getting into a lot of economic policy stuff that is, people deciding about, well, how does the market use the coin? How should the market use the coin? These are things that, that are new to a lot of people, because a lot of people just pull out their wallet and pull out a dollar bill and you spend it, and nobody really thinks about this stuff. And so I love that. I love thinking about that stuff, and I love talking about that stuff. But it makes people think. It makes people step outside a little bit sometimes to learn about how money works and why it has the value it has. And so the other thing about the change, one of the, not only are voting for and when, but there were a couple of votes involved. But some of the stuff that it's going to allow them to do potentially is that there's things called side chains. And so not only could the block size potentially increase to allow more traffic on the Bitcoin network itself, but you now have the ability that you didn't necessarily have before to run your own private transaction pool. Like Visa could now run a Visa side chain. They do all their transactions, and essentially they're settling at night. And this really wasn't easy or feasible or doable up until this point. And so that's something that you're probably going to read about if you're reading articles on the August 1st date. And so it's exciting. There's a lot of, it's still a hot topic among folks, but that is a major change that could be coming as well to Bitcoin to expand the economy and who the players are in there, and then what they're doing with it.
Yeah. So it adds more functionality. This split will help add additional functionality for more players to participate in a more flexible way, and I should say more players, but allow some additional functionality to do some things, right?
The split does not. The split could not ever happen. Like everybody could just play along on Bitcoin Core and just do what they're doing. What the code does, the code changes are what allow the side chains to be in existence now, essentially. But I think, and then going back to your blockchain based the blockchain based podcast, the thing I was looking for is the interplanetary file system is what it is. And the other day I bought there was an artist, it's a DJ, his moniker is RAC, and he was the first one to sell an entire album on the blockchain itself. So I bought the album with Ethereum, and then he actually and then I downloaded the album, but when I was downloading it was coming from this interplanetary file system, which I haven't done much research on yet. But anyways, that's an interesting concept that I need to figure out how to leverage or learn more about at least. And so
we were joking. I need to find a way to make the blockchain the replacement for the RSS feed, so to speak. And you could, in theory, I could provide that would be a secure method or secure way for people. We're always thinking at Gallup, we're kind of thinking, maybe some of this stuff is subscription based, where you would pay to get access to it. And the blockchain may hold the secrets, right? To me, be able to load an item and then have it paid for through Bitcoin or whatever, through the blockchain, and be able to deliver that, because it's a big database, right? At the end of the day, the blockchain is a big database. Is that fair to say?
It's a ledger that allows permissions on it to a database. Yes, I would. Yes.
There you go. So okay, and those are the terms I know.
All right.
So, no, but it was interesting. I like a blockchain based RSS feed.
Yeah,
would be right. There would be transactions and there could be items, and I could assign. There could be value exchanged for the download of MP3.
Yeah. So you could. The simplest, probably easiest, simplest first step would be, let's do it on the traditional mechanisms, but let's just start accepting Bitcoin and Ethereum for our Gallup subscriptions.
Yeah, we've been talking about the blockchain, and we're not anywhere close to using it, but there has been some discussion about it. I brought it up the other day when we were talking about our store, and I jokingly said, "So when are we going to start taking Bitcoin?" And they all snickered at me, and I'm always way too early on this stuff.
Yeah,
I'm always way too early. Ken had a couple comments from the chat room. One, he said, "Hopefully we get the unfiltered advice in the post show from you." You have to be conservative while you're in the real show. Listen, I know Edward. This is the way he is, whether he's on or off the record. So Ken, you're getting the best of Edward at this point. He also wants to know if you've heard of burst.coin mining.
I've seen it on the exchanges. I haven't looked into it at all though.
Okay. He says it uses hard drive space. This is what we've been talking about, right? Is that what you were referring to? And what were the two words you used?
Which one?
No, when we were talking about mining coin, you said there's two ways to do it.
Proof of stake or proof of work.
Okay.
Yeah. I can check out Burst Coin.
He said he's done it alongside of storage. So there's Ken, we had an early discussion. I think you probably heard it early in the show. that Mike and I had some issues with storage. We're going to explore some other ones. So maybe this is a conversation we can have kind of off the show. Those who are interested in doing this, I think there's some cool things around it. I don't think there's a future in it, but I think there's some cool things around distributed storage.
You don't think you don't think there's a future in storage, like that type of
not distributed? No, I don't.
But BitTorrent lasted for years and years and years.
No, it's out there and it has its purpose, but is there a future in it? I think, in other words, is there a financial future in it? BitTorrents work marginally well when it comes to financial transactions. There's no legitimate system out there that's running off of them that is that I would say is kind of recognized as a way to, everything is kind of, when you're talking about the dark web and we think about BitTorrents, in a lot of cases, that's the way it runs. I'm talking about, so storage has this great promise that it wants to compete directly with Amazon. See, all of a sudden now you have a business case and you're like, oh, okay, that makes kind of sense. Now, we've talked about this before. Voila tried this. Lassie, the company, a French storage company, created a product called Voila. And it was standard, standard file system storage. They broke it up into chunks and spread it, distributed. The problem is the big businesses don't go for that. They won't, the people who pay the bills are not going to allow their data to be sharded, so to speak. Mm-hmm. That's a little pun there. And then spread all over, as fertilizer, spread all over. They're just not going to allow that. They want complete control of every file system. So the big money today is in that. There's small stuff going on, but go ahead, challenge me.
I mean, isn't that Google's data centers are built that way right now. The data is chunked up and spread out across the entire. So I think if you have the enterprise folks are gonna do a private blockchain, but it might make more sense economically or resource wise to design it that way for a different reason, as long as they control all the servers and they control all the systems that it's running on. And so, it might not be public.
No one at Google has access. Like I don't have access to the Google servers. There's an SLA or an agreement that those are protected. Now a hacker could, but right, that data is sitting on a Google server somewhere, controlled by Google.
But the difference, I think the reason you're going to do this, at least in the non-enterprise level, is because of more of like a libertarian play of like, but in the in the enterprise arena, I think the question is, well, if this is a best practice for Google and we have, we've got hard drives that each have 100 meg or 100 gigs worth of space on them across the entire enterprise. Why are we buying more servers? We could use that extra space. We're not going to just plop a Word file on your hard drive, but we will put a shard of a Word file on your hard drive. So
so I'd like to believe that. So 20 years ago, I started working with Seagate Software that did reports, and they were one of the very first companies. They owned Crystal Reports at the time, and they had this concept of being able to run distributed reports. Because in the day, like 1999, 2000, you ran data. You'd run a report against a database. It could take hours for it to run, and if you had a single server running these, right, you would queue them up, and you were bandwidth, your I/O, right, was the limiting factor. They also, too, had some software you can install on the PCs around the company, and it would push those reports off to a PC that you left on, and it would run that report overnight and bring it back to the server, right? So this is 1999, distributed. It's an awesome idea. Nobody wants to do it, though. It's like system administrators are like, okay, what if that person doesn't leave their computer on? Like, what if there's a power failure in that? I can't walk around and turn on 25 PCs, right? I can control everything in my data center. So I think and I have a lot of sysadmins that listen to this show, so I better be careful. You can send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, if you disagree. And it's okay. I wouldn't die for this one. But most sysadmins they're control freaks, and they want complete control over the entire environment. And so that data is going to live on, and they're not going to flood the network. And now that we've gone global, and we see more and more, hours, where businesses have more things running for more hours and people in at different times, it just doesn't become efficient. And so I love the idea. Like, we were talking about SETI at home last week, and I even started a Home Gadget Geeks SETI at home project. So if you are running, it's a good time to mention it. If you're running SETI at home or any of those, Mike started another one. I forget what he does, another version of that on Bionic, but so if you're running SETI at home and you want to join the Home Gadget Geeks, I've got a group for that. I love, Edward, that idea of distributed networking for these kinds of things, where this is kind of a nonprofit, and if I don't process the file, nobody really cares. No one's going to knock on my door and say, "Hey, return your file." I love it for those kinds of community projects and that kind of stuff, but for storage, I'm a little skeptical.
But 20 years ago, nobody thought that enterprise would ever be in the cloud either, because cloud was public and scary, and so.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Except there's only 3 companies that we hold the feet to the fire on this cloud storage stuff for the most part, right? And so there's kind of a limiting. I hope you prove me wrong in some ways that we could find a way to distribute this. I just don't see that trust. Now, I do see that could work if we could distribute, if the consumer could take that on, and I could get cheap offsite storage. Or this is what LaCie tried to do with Voila, where they tried to get people to back up. They tried to get people to do this, and the people would, if I gave 2 gig worth, they would give me a gig of storage on that network. So 2 for 1 deal, right? I give 2 gig of space here. I get 1 gig of backup in the cloud. I actually think that's a great idea. It didn't work. For whatever reason. Could have been too early, could have been execution, could have been their Java, they had a little Java file or a little Java app that ran it, was terrible. So, I mean, it could have been that too, right? So
yeah, I agree that it might not even be files that we wind up sharding everywhere. Like enterprise might decide they want to do something else differently that we haven't even thought about right now instead. But it is certainly a different way of thinking about things, and I understand sysadmins wanting everything in a database on a single server somewhere. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I think generally they do. I have to be careful about making, big, but I think that Ted actually who's out in our chat room right now, the founder of System Administrator Appreciation Day, which just happens to be July 28th, 2017, which is tomorrow. So happy System Administrator Day to all those sysadmins that listen. Chances are you're listening to this after the fact, so I hope you had an awesome Friday. Ted, thanks for doing that work, by the way. Ted, how long ago? He's in our chat room. How long ago? I'm trying to remember. It's been, and I think if you go to sysadminday.com, that has all the information. 18th. So it's on his website, 18th annual Sysadmin Day. So happy sysadmin. By the way, we appreciate you guys. I know you're grumpy with us all the time because we break your stuff and we get angry when it doesn't work and some of those kinds of things. But we appreciate you guys in the enterprise, and maybe even not in the enterprise. Okay, let's do real quick. Any other relevant blockchain news, Edward, that we can cover here real quick, of things that people might want to know as it gets dark on you outside? It's great. You have a little light coming on you now.
I think we've covered pretty much everything that's the current, and so I'd like to do, if you want to do a show on the Ethereum rigs, the mining equipment, once we get it up and running, that might be I don't know if you really want to look at a bunch of equipment, but
I do. Yes. Yes, I do. That would be awesome. These guys would like it. So when you're ready, just contact me and we'll get you back on, and maybe we can get in a spot where it can be a little hands-on and you can show some of the stuff.
I can do it in my office. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. These guys geek pretty hard over hardware. So it's yes, we would love to. Okay. We would love. Hold on. So I told you in the beginning of the show, my friend's on this show, The Wall, and it just wrapped up. And so I said, "So tell me how much she's won." I've had a hard time watching this because she's so close to me, and it's like, oh, I hope she won something. And it looks like she's hugging. Oh wow. She won $195,000.
Wow, nice. That's awesome.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that explains why all the landscaping was going in her house. Well, congratulations, Jody. She does not listen to this podcast, so I am pretty sure that she will never know I actually disclosed that. So, but it's public TV, right? I mean, it was just on TV. I'm okay saying that. Edward, thank you for on short notice. And with this, I think we've got a good. It really helped me kind of walk through the week with this happening on the 1st, which here is coming up on next Tuesday. Is there a time? Is there like a certain time, or does it
I don't
matter?
remember off the top of my head. Yeah, yeah. So is now the time you buy your first portion of Bitcoin?
I think I'm going to do it this weekend.
All right.
I'm gonna wait. Hold on. Let's just check the price during the show. We've been $26.99. It's $1 cheaper than it was when we started the show. So it's a deal. It's even worse than that. It's 47 cents less than it was. Hey, I appreciate Edward. I appreciate your willingness to. It's a serious business for you, and I appreciate you coming on and just kind of filling us in on this. You've been a good friend to us as we've worked our way through it, and you're now the official Home Gadget Geeks Bitcoin and blockchain expert here at Home
I'm
Gadget
glad
Geeks.
you're interested. I'm glad you're interested, and your audience is interested, and certainly reach out if they have any questions. They can go to our website and they can contact us through that. So
yeah, we got a couple questions we'll get to in the post show. So hang tight. Let me wrap this up for time purposes. Can you stay around for 5 or 10 more minutes? Would that be all right?
For sure. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. It's you should start smoking a cigar out there now. It's dark and it's beautiful out there. It looks super nice. Is it nice out there right now?
Yeah, I don't know what the temperature is, but yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah. It's in the 80s, so it's just. Hold on, I have it right here. 76. I put my Surface 2, my Microsoft Surface RT, is now my weather station down here. So it currently says 76 and clear. The real feel is 79, 66% humidity. It is gorgeous out there right now. Clear skies. So you're doing the right thing. Well, remind everyone, don't forget about the Patreon link. Again, boo to Amazon. Boo. Amazon is evil. Although I just bought some stuff from them today. You can head out to the theaverageguy.tv, click on the Patreon link if you want to support it. We have $1 and $5 plans. No schemes going on here, and you don't have to use Bitcoin. It's real American dollars, $1 and $5, whatever. If you want to participate in supporting the show. We also want to let you know if you've got some questions. I told you earlier if you want to disagree with me on something or you want to add, and that's always okay. I love some good feedback. Jim at theaverageguy.tv or ping me on Twitter at Jay Collison. Hey, how do we find you on Twitter, or what's a good email address for you, Edward?
So my email is eweniger@alphabtc.com. But you can find us at alphabtc.com, Twitter alphabtc, Facebook alphabtc. So yeah,
good stuff. And the one and only, just a reminder, the one and only Bitcoin ATM in the city of Omaha at Jones Brothers. Super good coffee.
We finally have. I'm supposed to have signed paperwork very soon to get the second one launched. So yes.
What can you disclose the location, or is that still secret?
It's going to be in Lincoln, but I'm not going to say where yet.
Okay, good. Well, good. There'll be one down there when I make my trip down to Lincoln, and I need to get a burger. I can just take out some $10 out of the Bitcoin ATM, and how does that work? Can I treat it like an ATM that way, or I shouldn't?
Yeah, you could. If you have Bitcoin on your phone, you just send it to the ATM and it will give you $10. Yeah, nice. Or you can put it in $10. Yep.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. Congratulations on a second ATM. And if you're in Omaha and you want to see the ATM, Jones Brothers has great coffee and really good cupcakes. And so if you want to stop by there, it's right in our what's called Exarban Village. Just a great location here in the city of Omaha. Don't forget theaverageguy.tv, both platform web hosting is provided by Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting, and not really optimized for podcasters from people you know and you trust. Of course, you know that's Christian. We're back on Cyber Frontiers. In fact, we did one last night. We did a live demo of creating a honeypot. And so if you're interested in that, I'm still editing it right now. There were some numbers that showed up on the screen that needed to be blurred out. And so I'm still in the midst of that process right now, but Christian helped me with that. It's going to be the next Cyber Frontiers, probably out this weekend. But if you're interested in that web hosting, maplegrovepartners.com. Plans start as little as $10. And Christian's super reasonable and really wants to keep it in our community. So if you're interested in doing that, let him know. Don't forget about the app. And we thank LastPass for their sponsorship of that. And they've been good friends of the show as well. You can get that at homegadgetgeeks.com. We're live every Thursday 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern out here at the Average Guy TV Live. We'll do a few minutes of post-show as it gets darker on Edward over there. And with that, we'll say goodnight, everybody.
Night.
Okay, so Ted was saying that he has heard, why do some people say Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme? And have you heard that before?
Let me try to get some more light here. Hold on one second.
No, you're fine. You're actually it was cool. You had a great aura around you.
The reason it is described that way is because the folks that a couple reasons. The folks that initially got into it early on, so there's the macroscopic, which is people that bought 10,000 Bitcoins back when it was 25 cents, are now laughing all the way to the bank as they're selling all those Bitcoins to people who are paying $2,500 for it. And so the question is, if you buy these $2,500 Bitcoins, who's going to buy them for 5,000 from you someday? Maybe somebody will. It'll all dry up at some point potentially, which you mentioned already. The other part of that is, more current situation, the idea that if are people hyping it up, is the price hyped up just so people will buy it, for a couple of dollars more, price goes back down, you buy in, is there real value to it? And then you get into the whole discussion of what the technology is capable of, which is not really the equivalent of like the tulips, the tulip market. And so that, or gold, even gold has no functional value really other than making jewelry. And so Bitcoin is different in that regard. So,
well, and let's be clear, Bitcoin's value is in transactions. It's being able to provide of the value transferring from one person to another securely. There's value in that in our system, right?
And quickly, trustless. You don't have to trust the other party, and so in a digital world, that makes a lot more sense. Whereas gold, you would have to pack it up and ship it to somebody, and they hope they get 99% pure gold. You may not. So
and gold doesn't really. I mean, you think of its value; it's only valuable because people think it's valuable. Like,
Yep.
it isn't when you start really thinking about the monetary system. The U.S. financial system based on gold for a lot of years, not anymore. We can print what we want. It's faith and trust in the U.S. government to be able to honor that bill, those dollars, those whatever they are. And so when we think about Bitcoin, it's this value of transaction. It took energy to create the coin, right? And so there's some value associated with it from the energy that it took to get that created. And then it's the value, the trust between you and I in that. And yeah, if at some point in time, it's like anything. If nobody wants it, it's worth zero.
Yeah.
Right. And so it has intrinsic value because people might want it. There are plenty of things people buy that really have no value that they pay way too much money for. Here's a great example. What's going on right now. Video cards have become crazy because people are mining. Right. And there's this perceived value. The video cards themselves, they have a little bit of value because they're made out of some components. But if that card breaks, it has no value to you at that point, not working. There's not enough components in there that you could do anything with that would make it worth anything. So, when you start thinking of it that way, you kind of go, okay, well, that kind of, at least to me, that kind of makes sense. You're like, okay, the value is in the transfer. And it works because people are using it.
The oil market, like you mentioned, is a good example because you have some disruptive technology potentially coming in along with a bunch of government subsidies as well. But like the green energy and stuff like that and lithium-ion batteries and stuff like that are causing the price to not be where it used to be is one factor.
Yeah. Ted also said he'd heard. Yeah. So Ted, he said he had heard there was a big Ethereum theft. Ken, we talked about that in the beginning of the show, so you can pop back in there. Well, this is interesting. Let me ask you this. So let's just say it's $30 million escapes out through the system, and so it's gone. What kind of effect does that have on the system itself when we think about that money being stolen from someone's wallet, besides those people losing the value in it, which again, it's perceived value. It's not real value in this. I mean, they could have gotten it out, but when it's sitting there. So what does that do to the system when the system loses $30 million?
So when you say it's out of the system, it actually isn't. In both cases, really, the parity and the ICO, I can't remember which ICO it was, but in both those situations, I think it was CoinDash actually was the one that was hacked. In both those situations, it goes into another wallet in the system, and so it's not really out of the system. That's different, and you can't really have the same conversation about Bitcoin because in Ethereum's case, their monetary policy is basically we're going to keep printing. They don't have the hard cap that Bitcoin has. So $30 million out of Ethereum, well, we'll just delay the proof of work to proof of stake switch a little while longer, and that will fix that. That'll balance everything out. So, but with Bitcoin, yes, I would say it is a valid concern. I have the same concern or that nagging thought in the back of my head of, there are so many that have been destroyed. How do we what does that mean for the economy? And in that case, it makes each remaining Bitcoin worth more. That's different. The value of the Bitcoin in the monetary policy is different than the technology, because the technology has, if like side chains happen and Lightning Network happens on August 1st or whenever the voting finalizes, then you still have the transactional functionality with the same number of Bitcoins. And so you've kind of gotten around the fact that there's a fixed supply, and you've still enabled transactions to occur no matter what.
Yeah. And technically that $32 million, I don't know why I'm using that number, but let's just say this, that $30 million has not left the system. It's still in there.
Ethereum, yeah.
Right?
Right,
In Ethereum's
right.
case, it's still there. It's
Yep.
just going to be used somewhere else, right?
Yep.
So the
Yep.
the people who are hurt are the ones it was stolen from, not the
Correct.
system itself.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's just like, one, it's amazing. Like, you think, wow, there's a lot of people with a lot of money, or at least a lot of value inside the system. If $30 million could be stolen, that's
Again,
a lot.
I mean, we kind of we mentioned this on previous podcasts. The comparison of that, to what happens in the regular banking world is there's really no comparison. The Swift hack of the Bangladesh banks was 81 million, and so again, you've got a bad actor now that has a hacker, a bad guy that has $81 million. It's not out of the system. He's just going to go spend it in a different way than the folks, the bankers that had that money, or the account holders that had that money before. So,
yeah, that's how James Bond movies get started. By the way, some evil guy buying, or it's the early thoughts of Reagan trickle down economics. So hopefully that $30 million will trickle its way down as they buy big ticket items. To stimulate the economy. It has to be spent. It's only valuable when it's spent.
I think the other day, one of the other big articles or news pieces was about there was a Russian, and I think he was from Greece. I think that he ran the Russian exchange. The Russian exchange was called BTC-E, and it's been around for a long time. It was one of the most trusted Bitcoin exchanges. Well, the total value of what they got away with, or the amount of money they laundered, I think it was $4 billion. And not necessarily that they got $4 billion, I don't think, but the amount of money that ran through the system and went to illicit purposes. And so the idea that you can trace that better on a blockchain potentially is, people talk about it's all used, it's just bad guys doing stuff that that they shouldn't be doing. Well, in reality, it makes it easier to trace potentially than the traditional US dollar that can be I think could be done away with or hidden a lot easier. So because it's all digital, it's all public. So
yeah, and gold is untraceable.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think of it that way. So
Yep.
it's there are certainly this is a super interesting conversation, and it certainly it really challenges, I think it challenges our prepositioned, or the thoughts that we come at this from our own frame of reference of value and what money means. And it's just a different way of value, and if you had a ton of gold, let's just say today's dollars, that would be worth a lot. But if there's no one there to buy it, it's worth nothing. In fact, it may be because it's so heavy to move, it may be a liability if you need to move quickly. So don't have gold in the zombie apocalypse.
I
But
think.
you
I
want
mean the.
water and food.
I think the and in that case, then your alcohol then is worth a lot more if you're in the if you're in that situation, you can sell your alcohol for money. So the I think the interesting, I don't know, I guess in being in the space for so long, the Bitcoin, the economics of it, the rationale behind it, like some of like the questions that I have no problem answering and enjoy talking about still today are kind of a foregone conclusion. I think my current challenge I'm trying to wrap my head around is the enterprise space that we were talking about before, of like how do we show them that there's value, and that's more of like going, you got to go into the IT departments and stuff like that, and that's a much different conversation. But that's where I'm trying to find out or think through what that selling point is, I guess, right now.
Yeah.
So
I think you're super early. I mean, and you're going to need to hold on, even though you've been in this for 4 or 5 years. I think you're just super early. We as podcasters have the same problem that I think this is going to be a form of media that's going to be super popular and super distributed, by the way. And it can't be controlled in a lot of ways. And, so freedom of speech, freedom of the press, there's a lot of great things about podcasting, but it's still super early. And the ones who will do the best, I think, are the ones that stay around the longest. And I think the same thing for you. If you can hold out, if your capital can help you survive and you can put food on the table and eat and some of those kinds of things, I think you've positioned yourself in a nice place to be the authority, so to speak, in the enterprise. And I do see a day when the blockchain is very valuable to the enterprise.
And you see the big guys now, the CNNs, Fox, and those guys. They're trying to come alongside you or head in your direction in terms of digital distribution and trying to move from the cable networks to the internet platforms and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's super interesting to see some of these big names make their way to podcasting, and they're still in big media. There's still money there. Again, that the value in this is perceived value and influence. And that's the currency in podcasting or media is influence. And if I can say something and people go out and buy Bitcoin because of it, then you would say, hey, Jim, I ought to pay you to say more things about Bitcoin, right? Because that has a certain amount of value here. So Ken had fired up, he'd stayed on storage. And Ken, I don't know if you heard us earlier, both Mike and I had problems with it. Mike had some software problems. I had a router problem with it, but he has currently 15 gig of storage there. So it'll be interesting to see those payouts, Ken, are coming at the end of the month here. I think storage pays, or at least calculates the pay. And I think they just released this big old spreadsheet that has seriously, I think everybody who's in it, there's just, you just find that in your key and you take that key to your wallet. Cause you only, it's supposed to be secure, right?
Yeah. I can't, I'm trying to think through what that would be. You take that key to your wallet. So, I mean, it would have to be some sort of multi-sig wallet where so you would be the 2 of 3, basically. They would probably be the anyways, I don't know how they do it.
Something. I don't know. I didn't stay around long enough to get paid. So I should show up on the July report because we did some. I'm not sure if I did enough. I think you have to do a giga throughput or something like that to even get a pay on it. So Ken, you'll have to keep us posted on if you show up on the. Ken, you having any problems? Either PC problems or router problems with because Mike and I had both. Ted says he just recently watched Kelly's Heroes where Clint Eastwood steals the Nazi gold. Well, in a world where gold has value, if you can steal it today, just not in a zombie apocalypse, you do not want to be caught with gold in your pockets because it slows you down.
If people want to look further into the stuff that we've been talking about, the BIP, those are the things we were talking about. The BIP, which stands for Bitcoin Improvement Protocol. They're the basically the things that get voted on through Git that are submitted through GitHub, etc. So BIP 91 and BIP 148, and then segregated witness. You could also look that up, and you'll get a bunch of news articles that'll kind of explain it. If anybody wants to dive deeper, those are some
cool.
terms.
Hey, if you think about those links after the fact, if you can shoot them over to me, I'll include them in all the show notes so we can get that in. If you're listening live, we want to thanks for coming out tonight. I don't want Edward the mosquitoes will be out here pretty quick, and so if you'd hang on tight for me 1 sec.
Yeah,
we're going to let you guys in the chat room go. Thanks for coming out tonight. A good spirited conversation, and we appreciate you guys out there. We'll see you back next Thursday. I'm trying to think. Hold on, let me see who we have coming up. Oh, John Larson from AIM. I'm getting a ton of Omaha folks on here, which is pretty cool. John Larson works over at AIM. He's a gadget nerd. He'll have some good stuff for us. And then on the 10th is Tony Chang, and the founder of ReadyNAS is coming on to talk about the ReadyNAS story, kind of the NAS story of building. He was one of the early founders of these NAS products. And so he is coming on. And then I think we'll have Joel Rushworth, who's an MVP out of Canada. So we got those coming up. Thanks, guys. Edward, hang tight for me 1 sec. We'll see you guys next week.